You mentioned that genetically some people need longer recovery time, correct?
Well, sure, obviously, just as there are those individuals who do not tolerate exposure to high-intensity sunlight stress as well as others. Now, it's a very interesting issue you bring up here. Maybe I can best explain it this way. Only if there was a God would he have the luxury of being able to look inside of your body, read your genetic material, your DNA, and be able to tell you with absolute certainty, thou shalt perform exactly 5 sets per workout every 76 hours, sir. Any more, any less will compromise your progress. Now, I've never pretended to be God. I can't guarantee those who call me or buy my books that I would start you out on the same baseline program that God Almighty would, although I'm not so sure it ain't the same program. All I can do as an informed and a highly experienced trainer is get an individual started out on a baseline program, I call it, one that works quite well for those with at least average recovery ability. Then they get to call me back every 2 weeks or so I can help them monitor their progress and deem whether or not it's satisfactory. If I deem it's not satisfactory, then I recommend certain modifications. Another way to look at it. Let's say, TC, that you were a sun tanning coach, if there were such a ridiculous thing, and you had 50 clients under your charge. Would you bring them all out into the intense August sunlight at the equator for 2 hours the first time?
No.
No. You might burn some of them to death. There is a wide range of variation with individuals in regard to sunlight stress tolerance. That does not contradict the fact that in every case the presence of the sun is required. The theory of sun tanning does not change. Nature does require the presence of the sun. Back to exercise. Just because there are those individuals who do not tolerate high-intensity exercise stress as well as others, does not contradict the fact that high-intensity training stress is an absolute requirement for inducing growth. The variation comes in with how much exercise stress any given individual can tolerate. As I made the point on the first tape, I've got some clients only doing 3 sets once a week. These might be viewed as the equivalent of albinos or Scandinavians with regards to sunlight stress tolerance. If you look at it that way, it's not so hard to understand. You'll be less incredulous. Now, most bodybuilders, knowing nothing about this, they'll run to their local newsstand every month, grab up a bunch of magazines, run home, riffle through the pages at random, pick out an arbitrary training program and stick to it slavishly for 2 years, and of course make little or no progress unless they're super genetic freaks taking a lot of steroids. And of course most of us are not that way. After 2 years, they'll either give up or just continue going to the gym, having lost their fire just as a habit or a social ritual. The science of exercise is not infinitely complex, as I said before, but it's not that simple either. There's another point here. Let's say that a listener calls me or buys my book and starts out on that baseline program, and it does work quite well from the beginning. Now, several years ago, Arthur Jones made the statement that from the time an individual starts training, he should be able to reach the upper limits of his muscular potential in 2 years, and now I realize he was grossly wrong. You should be able to reach the upper limits of your potential in 6 to 12 months. I pointed this out to several people, and they became incredulous immediately. And I say, now hold on a second. If you were to find yourself in the jungle tomorrow and you happened upon a voodoo witch doctor, he would probably have about a 0% success rate with his patients. Then all of a sudden you introduce to him these miracles called antibiotics, aspirin, sterile bandages. His success rate literally skyrockets off the charts. He thinks you're either God or the devil. We have this wonderful thing in Western civilization called theoretical knowledge. The purpose of a theory, again, is to serve as a guideline for successful human action. If any of the listeners are doubtful that it's possible to reach the upper limits of your muscular potential in 1 year or less, I'll give you another analogy. If NASA, the Space Administration, can send a man to the moon and bring him back safely every time, and they have, don't tell me we can't succeed with each and every one of our missions to the gym here on Earth in a spectacular fashion as well.
Okay. All right.
Sending a man to the moon requires the application of theoretical knowledge from physics, astronomy, electronics, engineering, medicine, biology. Building muscles should be a cakewalk compared to a moonwalk.
Okay.
Don't tell me we can't succeed with every one of our missions to the gym here on Earth if they can send a man to the moon and bring him back safely each time.
Now, in your previous tapes, you've told people not to accept things blindly. So I have to ask you certain questions that people might ask, okay? Now, genetically, you've said that some people need longer recovery time.
Yes, they do.
But could it not be said that some people genetically need more of a workload?
No, not more of a work. See, I think your use of terms here is a little bit confusing.
Okay.
You're confusing. Well, actually, you did use the word more of a workload.
Yes.
No, now this is a typical mistake, TC, and I hear it all the time.
Okay.
The reason people continue to ask that question is this. They have failed to understand what the specific stimulus is in the first place that serves to trigger the growth machinery into motion. Harder than the preceding until finally we get to that last possible rep, the 10th one in this case, where you're trying as hard as you can, you're gritting your teeth, you're shaking all over, you're exerting yourself maximally, and you're barely able to complete the rep. Which rep do you think obviously would be the most productive in terms of stimulating an increase in strength and size, TC?
Well, the last one, of course.
If you could curl 120 pounds for 10 reps and you only did one rep, do you think you'd ever grow?
No.
If you could curl 120 pounds for 10 reps and you only ever did 6, do you think you'd ever grow?
No.
So what is the stimulus? What is the workload that serves to induce muscular hypertrophy? It's the last rep of a set carried to failure.
Okay.
This is the important point. Sometimes I get phone consultation clients calling me back in 2 weeks saying, oh, gee, Mike, they're actually quite anxious. They'll say, Mike, I tried to stay to the program, but I gave in to that temptation. I did one set. I wanted to do another set so bad. I just felt like I needed another set. And I said to him, well, sir, you used the word felt. What did you feel? And he couldn't identify the feeling. The feeling, in fact, was fear and uncertainty. We didn't send men to the moon based on vague feelings. If you don't use your theoretical knowledge and apply it with 100% consistency, listener, you're never going to achieve bodybuilding success. Yes, I told him, of course you felt like you could do another set. In fact, if I stuck a shotgun up your butt, you'd be here in the gym for 3 days training nonstop. A bodybuilding workout is not an endurance contest. Then I pointed out, look, the specific stimulus that triggers the growth machinery into motion is that last rep of a set carried to failure. And beyond that, once you have achieved growth stimulation on that last rep, you don't have to do it again. This is the fallacy. This is the mistake.
All right, let me bring in a quote from a third party here. This is are you familiar with Charles Poliquin? He's an Olympic strength coach.
What's his name?
Charles Poliquin. He's a Canadian strength coach. He's coached.
It rings the bell.
Okay. Well, he had this to say regarding high-intensity training. He says he doubts that it works as a year-in, year-out training method. He says that strength gains are correlated with total motor unit activation, and he doesn't think one set to failure training will get you to recruit all the motor units available.
Well, actually, I've got a response to that here.
Okay.
In fact, it's from one of your listeners, TC, or not listeners, but readers.
Okay.
Bill Phillips took the time last week to send me a couple letters from your readers in response to the stuff in your magazine about me. Can I read this to you quickly?
Sure.
Dear Bill, I have just renewed my subscription to Muscle Media 2000, and I am presently recovering from a heavy-duty workout. Yes, Mentzer's hot. However, I am not writing this letter to give Mentzer praise. I am writing this letter to thank him for saving my life. Overtraining was literally killing me. At best, my yearly gains were marginal, and I was constantly plagued by fatigue, minor injuries, and flu-like symptoms. I attempted to induce gains by adding calories, but I only got fat. So I looked worse. Heavy-duty training was my last resort. I figured that I might as well give it a shot since I had nothing to lose. Hell, I didn't gain from what I was doing anyway. To make a long story short, intense heavy-duty training works. It's brief, effective, and it doesn't fry your nervous system. Thanks again, and tell Mike to keep up the good work. Yours very truly, Sean Jones. P.S. This is the point. P.S. If people doubt the effectiveness of Mentzer's theories, maybe they can talk to one of his most famous trainees. You know, Dorian, what's his name? When people bring up a hypothetical objection to high-intensity training, stating it cannot or does not work, I become a little bit bored by those people. You know, we have this thing called reality and evidence. It worked for Dorian Yates, Aaron Baker, David Dirth, David Paul, Mike Mentzer, Roland Kickinger, and an untold number of thousands and thousands of others. It does work. Yes, it does build strength, but that is a prerequisite for building size. Remember back in high school, TC, either you or one of your friends had a broken arm. They put it in a cast. After 3 or 4 weeks, they take the cast off, and the first thing you notice is your arm shriveled up, the muscle atrophied. What is the first thing the physical therapist does to build up the muscle? He gives you strength training exercises. If you want to get bigger, you got to get stronger. Yes, heavy-duty training is essentially a strength training program, but you cannot get bigger without getting stronger. When a muscle atrophies, it gets weaker. When it hypertrophies, it gets stronger. There is a relationship between strength and size.
Okay, great.
Is that sufficient answer?
Sure, okay. Let's get a little bit more simplistic here. What are your views regarding like free weights compared to machines? Do you have any preferences? Is it necessary to use free weights always?
If you were to believe the manufacturers of free weights, PC, you would have the idea that mankind has benefited enormously in every aspect of his life due to scientific technology and mechanization, in every aspect of his existence except bodybuilding. Now here's the most important point perhaps. Again, PC and dear listener, as a bodybuilder, obviously your primary goal is not merely to handle heavy weights, once again, as I said before, but to achieve high-intensity muscular contraction. When you're doing an incline press with a free bar, for instance, PC, a certain significant portion of your focus and effort is diverted away from moving the resistance towards the problems of balance and coordination. And to the extent that your attention is diverted from the resistance towards the problems of balance and coordination, you make the exercise that much less effective in terms of achieving a high-intensity muscular contraction. I have my in-the-gym clients use a guided mechanism, an incline press machine or a Smith machine, so that none of their energy, effort, or focus is wasted even slightly towards the problems of balance and coordination. In other words, all of their effort is directed merely against the resistance so they can achieve a maximum contraction of the muscle. That's the best answer by far. No one can possibly refute the validity of that statement.
Okay.
Well, they can refute it, but it will not be. It won't work.
All right.
It's really a very interesting thing. We did have this thing called the Industrial Revolution, which followed from the Enlightenment. It's one of the things that makes our country and Western civilization so superior to the rest of the world. And yet bodybuilders seem to forget that. Yes, I love machines. I love my car. I love my electric lights. I love my video, my 50-inch TV, hot and cold running water. I love the dentist and his drill. I love the surgeon and his tools.
Okay. Point well taken. Okay.